Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're broadcasting from the Thomas K. McKeon Center for Creativity, and I'm your host, Corey D. Taylor. My guest today is Russ Kirkpatrick. He is the owner as well as the producer for his company, Kirkpatrick and Kinslow. If you want to know what it's like to be able to make movies in the Midwest, well, you come to the right place, so stay tuned because this is Up Close with Corey Taylor. All right, welcome back, and thank you for joining us. We are here with producer and owner of Kirkpatrick and Kinslow Production Company. How are you, Russ Kirkpatrick?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Man, well, great. It's great for you to be here, man. You have been a busy guy. So tell me some of the things that you have been doing as of late, because I know with your production company, you all just seem like you came out of the blue and you just started sweeping the whole Midwest area of doing documentaries and things of that nature, and now you're doing feature-length films. So give us a little bit of kind of what are you up to at this moment?
Got it. So we were very fortunate to win an Emmy earlier this year for Boomtown: An American Journey, which is a film which really focuses on pieces of Tulsa's history. And so that was exciting. And
Yes.
It's less probably about our production company and more about the people associated with making of the film. All in all, we had a crew of about 25 people, and we had extras and everyone else associated with the film. Probably it topped around 150 people. So this Emmy's for everyone. It's not just for us. So there's that piece. We're in post-production now on a documentary that focuses on a woman who has a disease that is leading to dementia. The working title for that is called Susan's Story. It's a movie that will be humorous in light of really dramatic things that are happening. Ultimately, it's the biggest challenge she's faced in her entire life. So we've got that. We are working on developing a second in the Boomtown series. And then we've got a fiction film that we're in development on right now, which will focus on the Osage murders. So our hope and expectation is to be able to film that entirely in Oklahoma.
Wow, so you said, so that's a lot. I mean, so you are not letting grass grow under your feet in any way, shape, or form. You and your partner and your company. But I have a question for you. When you started down this road to do Boomtown, what led you to the story? Because, we have people that want to do, and there's a lot of people that are getting ready to do the whole Greenwood, race riots and things of that nature. But what made you do Boomtown?
So we had a conversation with the folks at Tulsa Historical Society and Museum. This was New Year's 2013. So Michelle Place is the executive director. She and I and Andy, the other side of Kirkpatrick and Kinslow Productions, we met at a location outside of Tulsa, and we were having a big New Year's Eve celebration, and we got to talking about possibly doing a little promotional film that kind of showcased different pieces of what Tulsa Historical does for third graders in the Tulsa area. So from that promotional film, once we started interviewing the different people associated with that, iconic, luminaries from Tulsa, ranging from Clifton Tolbert to Michael Wallace, Sharon King Davis, the list goes on and on.
Yes.
We immediately began to notice that there was much more here than just a short promotional film. So that short promotional film was called Voices of History. And then from there, through a set of interesting circumstances, we ended up reshooting some scenes from that. And that ultimately is what became Boomtown. So we didn't start out to say we're going to make a 45-minute documentary on Tulsa's history, but that's how we ended up with it.
Wow. So let me go here. So, for our viewers to know this, this is not your first, venture into entertainment or film, as you will, but you come from a journalism background. So talk to me a little bit about that, because the thing that I'm always interested in when I interview people, I'm always about our viewers being able to learn something different, whether we have young people who are aspiring to do something, or whether we have older people who are saying like, yo, it might be too late, but then they have this passion inside that they never were able to quench that thirst, but now they are seeing this show and they're like, yo, if he did it, I can do it. So you were in journalism, and tell us a little bit about like that. What was that like, being in journalism back in the day?
So I did journalism for 20 years, broadcast journalism, both on television and on radio, both as an anchor and also as a reporter. So what was that like? Well, I was reporting whenever the towers fell in New York.
Wow.
And so I remember that day. At that time, I was working in Milwaukee, and just that feeling that the nation is collectively having at the same time. So as a reporter, you immediately go into kind of a mode of who do I know and how can we best cover this story? Ultimately, it's storytelling. That's what a reporter really does. Interviewing people, finding curious individuals, and there's a lot of crime involved with reporting, unfortunately. So I certainly did my fair share of that. But what I found really meaningful and exciting is different characters that you can run across in life and be able to kind of share their stories. And so moving from broadcast journalism, where I did, the anchoring, reporting, and also a fair amount of investigative work, doing work in film in some respects is similar on the documentary side, in that you are able to run across fascinating stories and you can really take that to a completely different level. It's really, I guess, black and white, night and day compared to broadcast journalism because it is film. But there are many similarities to it. And in the end, filmmaking is business. So you have to look at it really from that perspective as well. After I moved away from journalism, it's been about 10 years ago, I spent about 5 or 6 years in financial services. Interestingly, that has become part of risk management, which is a lot about what filmmaking is focused on as well.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that, because, I'm an adjunct, and one of my classes that I had to teach last semester at the university was risk management and, insurance and like hedging your bets and all of that stuff. So what, from your foray into risk management, what were you able to bring into this film adventure? Because with the rate of films that you all are creating, from using Tulsa as your hub, you're doing a lot, and there are people that are trying to make films that are struggling to find funds to make these passion projects. So how much of that risk management and financial services have you brought over into your whole venture into filmmaking?
Corey, you probably know that you could talk to 10 filmmakers, 10 film directors, 10 film producers, and they're probably all going to give you ideas and focuses that are a little bit different. So what Andy and I have done is we have found our own way. So I think the answer to your question is moving from risk management and investments, focusing a lot of what we do, looking at every project and saying there's a risk associated with this. And the risk is ultimately, if you're going to make a movie, can you get it out into the world? In other words, can you get it into distribution? That's really the first question that we ask whenever we're talking to people about a movie. And that is, here's a great idea on another Boomtown. Okay, well, who is going to watch it and what's relevant about it that is going to drive people to ultimately watch it? If you look at movies or a documentary as a product, it's like, who is going to buy it?
Correct.
And so really, I think assessing the risk associated with that. Then there are other bits and pieces, from a granular level, really looking at the people that you bring in, making sure that you've got the proper editor, making sure you've got the proper, cinematographer, and you've hired the proper director, because there's risk associated with all of those things as well. So I would say that bringing a lot of that energy and focus from that line of work into this business is really critically important, because in the end, if you make a bad bet, which on some level filmmaking could be considered a bad bet. But as long as you are careful, we try to be as careful as we can and make really solid, good decisions going in, not only with the people that we bring in, the subject that we focus on, but ultimately working with distributors as early as possible to get something out in the world. And hopefully we can assess that risk proportionately.
Wow. So Boomtown, was this your first feature to do that you did? How did it feel to do it? It starts off as one thing, it morphs into Boomtown, and then you walk away at the Heartland Emmys, you walk away with the Emmy for that category. Like, what did that feel like, man?
So the whole process, let's start backwards. Okay. Getting an Emmy, you've done that before.
Yes.
So I've been Emmy nominated in the past, and certainly I've been very fortunate to have awards in a variety of different things. So that's kind of a self-satisfying life event whenever that happens. And to tag team off of what I mentioned earlier, that Emmy for Boomtown really does belong to everyone who just, a lot of sweat and a lot of blood went into that whole project. So that said, that felt really, really nice as a human experience. The whole process of putting it together, you having been there before in filmmaking, it is tenuous at best whenever you're trying to piece everything together. And a lot of this, as is the case in many documentaries, there are a lot of things that are just out of your control. And so it's really just assessing day by day, what can we do to make this work, and just moving ahead. So you're problem solving throughout the entire process. And so, was it a bad experience? No, I'd do it again. We will do it again.
Yeah, you're doing it again on multiple levels. You got Boomtown 2 coming out. So let me ask you this. So as you're going through this process, and you're right, it's this arduous process and of making this thing that we call film or documentaries or whatever, some type of visual media, like, when you first started out, and I know earlier you said we assess what risk is involved with the subject matter and things of this nature. When you did that, did you have your eyes focused on, this is a good story, this could put us in the line for getting these awards, or was it just a passion project and we're just going to go this route?
I think the best way to answer that question is, I would say that whatever project we've been fortunate enough to work on, whether I go all the way back to journalism, we would pick different projects and find that connectivity to the audience. And I think that by looking at something, a subject matter that people can relate to, ultimately we can focus on that and just do the best doggone job that we can for that. And if we're fortunate enough that people take notice, that's great. I don't know that I've ever been that person who looks at it and says, this is Emmy material, we're doing it, and then working backwards. Right. There are so many complexities with putting together a movie, putting together documentaries. I don't know if I can function that way, and we didn't for Boomtown. We're just very fortunate that people took notice.
So who were some of the people that worked in Boomtown? I know you had like Clifton Talborn and Michael Wallace, but who are some of the people that were behind the scenes that worked on it? Like who did you have direct?
Sure. So on that project, there's this up-and-coming little film director. I say little because he's young, Boney Tomlinson.
And he's little too.
He's a little guy. Yeah. But very smart, very quick, very well connected, and we met through a connection. And we chose Boney to direct the film, and ultimately he was able to bring in an amazing crew for that project. And he has since gone on to produce multiple other projects, and he's still at it, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Boney. Boney is a great guy. Have an opportunity to have worked with Boney in the past. But yeah, he's definitely a visionary, has great vision. And, but I know you're very modest in your approach, but here's what I do know. Like, you had Boney direct Boomtown, but you too have put on a director's hat for a couple of your projects. So talk to me about what projects do you decide that you're gonna, outsource the directing, and then which ones do you decide that you're gonna keep and direct for yourself?
That's an interesting question, and probably the best way I could address that would be to say that sometimes the projects seem to choose me as a director,
Okay.
as opposed
That's
to
fair.
me going in and saying I'm going to direct this. The business model that Andy and I have really focuses on us working, our production company working as executive producers. So we find resources for film and then producing from the perspective of putting the pieces together, getting it into pre-production, principal photography, and then all the way through post-production, from editing and color correction to sound design and sound mixing and composing and getting all of that together. So from the producer standpoint, that's where we really like to live. That said, there are projects that come along, and if there is a focus and an energy on a project and a director isn't available, I've stepped in a couple of times, and without regret. It's a lot of work wearing a director's hat and a producer's hat. Just on the creative side, I would say probably I love producing. I'm that guy who loves to check the boxes off and kind of, move from one project to the other. Directors clearly have to look at the overall vision and execute on behalf of the entire project, and there has to be a rapport with the director and every person, not only on the crew, but if there's a cast, there just a lot of moving parts. So it's a lot to do them together. That said, we've done that, and I think what I would say for any person wanting to get into filmmaking, whenever you're looking at projects, it's almost like getting into a relationship.
Yes.
It really is. And it becomes a long-term relationship. So you have to have that energy and that passion to make absolutely sure that you can focus all the way through to make sure that the project is finished. Because if you don't have that energy and if you don't have that passion, you'll probably drop the project. And so I would say that's a long way of answering your question. In directing, we felt so passionate about projects that I will put myself out there and direct them, because there are stories that need to be told.
I, being a person who host and I produce, I can ditto your sentiments, because I will tell you the very ideal of having to direct. I've done that on a project that I'm working with, and that's not my thing. I mean, I will step up and do it if no director is available, but I really like to just let's get the right pieces together. Let's put the right people on the bus, get everybody in the right seat, and let's drive and let's get to our destination. And then but I don't really want to direct, I started off with my stuff as an actor. And so then, after realizing I wasn't a great actor in my own assessment, though, I've been told I'm a good actor, but in my own assessment, I'm like, I'm not a good actor, so what else can I do? And then when we did the Wayman Tisdale story, which was a documentary about the late, great Wayman Tisdale, I got bit by that documentary bug. I got bit by that. Most people don't understand this, but documentaries and television hosting, these were the original components of what they call reality television before we got the new stuff. And so I was more drawn to reality-based stuff, like interviewing and doing documentaries and things of that nature. So with that being said, you had this journalism aspect, but how much do you accredit your journalism with driving you, and then you went from journalism to financial services? How much do you accredit your journalism to saying, I'm going into making movies now?
So I think having a capability to interview people and pull things out of them, for whatever reason, I've been told that I have that gift, I guess, a gift. It's Oklahoma, we can say gift. So it's just a quality that I feel fortunate to have, where people sit down with me and they will tell me things, and I certainly do not take that for granted. So that would be the crossover between journalism and filmmaking as it relates to documentaries, and it may end there. I'm not terribly sure a documentary is a work of journalism. I think you have to be ethical in your approach, but ultimately the way that you tell stories with authentic journalism, not fake journalism, but you certainly have to have the proper attribution, and it's more so having the pros and cons and making sure everything is proportionate. I think in filmmaking, you have a little more flexibility to be able to tell a story that has more pieces to it. If you think of the documentary, The Thin Blue Line, that's an example of someone back in the 70s telling a story from multiple points of view. And so you have that flexibility to do that with a documentary, and it's really focused on that. But I don't think that we should forget in filmmaking and documentary filmmaking that really it comes down to there's a large entertainment component. I think sometimes in the news business, authentic news, it really comes down to this happened,
Facts,
and then this
and
happened,
yes.
and this happened.
Yes.
And so I'm not sure documentary filmmaking is the most fascinating if you do it that way.
Yeah, I think the thing that drew me to documentary is because there is so much room for creativity. You do have this journalistic aspect of, the research and making sure it's ethical and you have your facts right. But then there's this great latitude to create and be creative, because at the end of the day, most documentaries have, to some people, dry subject matter, but the more creative you can be, with shooting that, I think the more it lends to being more entertainment filled. And I think that was the thing that with the Wayman Tisdale story, where we hit home, like, it made people laugh. It made people cry. And it had the same elements of a real feature-length film. Well, not a real feature-length, but a feature-length film that was more contrived versus based on real subject matter. Do you get that same sense?
I would say probably so. That was a great documentary, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
That was fantastic. I would say blurring the lines between reality, I think you have to be careful. I would never suggest that someone in a documentary fib or cross a line of ethics as it relates to leading someone to believe something that is not simply black and white, not true.
Right.
I think where we come from is more so just you have more flexibility to tell a story. And a lot of times, people coming from a journalism background, they'll certainly understand we have more time. To actually tell a story. So
Yes.
I think you can tell it in a more full and entertaining and informative way than you have. So I guess that's really saying that it's apples to oranges with journalism and documentary filmmaking in general.
Believe it or not, Brian Schodorf, a great friend of mine, he was at the helm of directing and writing and being the lead producer. And that was the thing that he showed was he's from a journalism background, and then when he came over into this documentary space, he had done documentaries that were just like Poverty in Chicago, and he just actually got nominated for like 3 Emmys. Last year he had nominated for 5. And so when I was on set with him to make the Wayman Tisdale story, we were like having so much fun. And I was like, dude, what are we making here? Like a feature? He's like, no, this is a documentary. I was like, no, documentaries are not supposed to be fun when you make them. But of course, Wayman was fun subject matter. So with that being said, out of all of the projects that you have done and the ones you're getting ready to do, which one is the most near it? Now, I know everybody loves the projects that they do, but everybody has that one special one. So what is that one, or maybe 2, I'll give you a latitude, that you really just like, I love this?
So I would say, in addition to the documentary and the fiction work, we also do a lot of nonprofit work and a lot of corporate work for little shorter films and storytelling and that sort of thing. I don't know if we have a large enough repertoire at this point to actually say, oh my gosh, I love this one. So really all I've got to talk about is, a couple of them. And I would say that for each project that we've been fortunate enough to work on, what brings us excitement and joy and focus and just an authentic, genuine, great life experience is working with amazing people. It's always nice when you are given an opportunity to be alongside people for a journey, and for sure that making a film is a journey. Yes. And so I would say in Boomtown we had that opportunity to be alongside some of the most remarkable human beings, nice people who are creative, and their focus is genuine. That's a really nice experience to have. So that was Boomtown, An American Journey, and then Susan's Story, which we're working on now. Not only the people who are on the crew for this particular project, but also the subjects happen to be just outstanding human beings who are sharing just really deep and intimate parts of their life so that there can be a better understanding of what frontotemporal degeneration is, what Alzheimer's is, and ultimately how that leads to dementia. So that's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, but those life experiences with amazing people really make filmmaking worth it.
Wow. So you're very humble and and that's great. I've noticed that about you since I met you. And that's okay. I'm gonna let you slide with the way you answered that because I know you're excited about all projects. So when you're out there working now and, after the success of Boomtown and, you're working with all these different people, what does it kind of feel like? Because it's kind of becoming like when it comes to making stuff, you and your company, you all are the people that are being sought after now to say, hey, you get a lot of projects that come across your desk. So how does that feel and how are you weeding through that? You know what I mean? Because I know you have high demand now. Everybody want to get a meeting with Russ Kirkpatrick most likely. So video people, audience, he's not going to answer the way you want him to answer, but how do you feel to be like the golden child?
Well, I don't feel like we're golden children, but I feel like we're in a very fortunate position. We've had some, success with our projects thus far, and that's wonderful. What I would say is, as it relates to going through, it probably goes back or ties back to our earlier conversation, and that's assessing risk. A lot of times what will end up happening, I can think of a project off the top of my head that we were pitched recently, and we went through a whole process, and it's in an art form that we're very familiar with. And we were approached by a producer. It's probably been a couple of years back. At our very infancy. And there was well, what do you think about this? Could we do this? Could we do that? And what about this? And there's an international component to it. And ultimately, Andy and I took the time to kind of research through to determine what is the story and who would the audience be. And it's not that we didn't like the subject matter was fantastic, but ultimately we decided now's not the right time for that particular project. And so each and every, I think there are great stories out there. It's just a matter of determining what it is that can fit correctly within what it is that you do.
In 5 seconds, real short answer, what would you say it takes for a person to be successful?
Successful in filmmaking, I would say you have to have tenacity and follow through.
All right, Russ Kirkpatrick, thank you for your time,
you
man.
Bet.
Thank you for joining us today. I would like to thank my guest, Russ Kirkpatrick, for joining us. Think about this. Change is inevitable, but your attitude towards that change, it is always optional. Until next time, keep looking forward.